In the beginning, our life together felt simple and full of hope. Ethan had big dreams, and I believed in every one of them. We lived in a small rented house in Denver, and every evening we would sit at the kitchen table talking about the future we wanted to build. He wanted to start his own construction company. He said he was tired of working for other people and wanted something that truly belonged to us. I had been saving money for years before I met him. It was money from long hours at work, skipped vacations, and careful budgeting. When Ethan explained his plan, he looked at me with so much confidence that I didn't hesitate. I told him if we were building a life together, then we should build the business together too. That was when I decided to invest the $75,000 I had saved. It was almost everything I had. Ethan promised me it was the start of our future. He said one day we would look back and be proud that we took the risk together. At first, things seemed to be working. Ethan was excited every day, meeting clients and planning projects. I helped however I could. I handled small paperwork tasks after my job, helped organize invoices, and even spent weekends helping him check equipment and supplies. The company slowly started getting attention. Ethan began landing bigger jobs, and the money started coming in. I remember feeling proud when I saw his name printed on the side of the company truck. It felt like proof that our sacrifice was paying off. But as the business grew, something in Ethan began to change. He became more distant and less interested in talking about the company with me. At first I assumed he was just busy. Running a business can be stressful, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. Still, a small part of me couldn't ignore the feeling that I was slowly being pushed out of something I helped create. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that things would go back to normal soon. I trusted my husband, and I believed our future was still the same one we had planned together. Our relationship moved forward quickly after that. Ethan had a way of making every plan sound possible. He talked about buying a house one day, having a quiet life, and building something that would last for years. I believed him because he always spoke with certainty, like he could already see the future. In the first year of our marriage, things felt stable. Ethan spent most of his time working on growing the company. Some mornings he left before sunrise, saying he had meetings with contractors or suppliers. At night he would come home tired but satisfied, telling me that another project was close to being approved. I tried to support him in small ways. I handled the house, paid bills on time, and made sure things stayed organized so he could focus on work. When he was stressed, I reminded him that every business takes time to grow. I wanted him to know I was on his side. As the months passed, the company started gaining more projects. Ethan hired 2 workers and rented a small office space near a warehouse district. He seemed proud of what he was building. Sometimes he would take me there in the evening after everyone had left, showing me the blueprints and plans for upcoming jobs. Standing there, I felt like I was part of something important. Watching those plans spread across the table made it feel real. I imagined the company growing bigger and becoming something we could rely on for the rest of our lives. Friends and family often said Ethan was lucky to have someone who believed in him so strongly. I never thought of it as luck. To me, it was simply what marriage meant. When one person has a dream, the other stands beside them. During that time, I never questioned where things were going. Everything looked like it was moving in the right direction. The company was growing slowly but steadily, and Ethan seemed determined to succeed. I truly believed we were building a future that belonged to both of us. As time passed, the rhythm of our life started to change in small ways. Ethan's schedule became harder to understand. Some days he left the house without saying much, and other days he stayed out far later than usual. When he came home, he often looked distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself that growing companies require long hours and constant attention. Ethan said he was dealing with new contracts and complicated negotiations. I didn't want to seem doubtful, so I accepted his explanations and gave him space. But the distance between us slowly became noticeable. Conversations that once lasted hours turned into short replies. When I asked about upcoming projects, he gave quick answers and changed the subject. He no longer showed me plans or asked for my thoughts the way he used to. Another thing that started bothering me was how secretive he became about money. In the past, we spoke openly about expenses and profits. Now when I mentioned finances, Ethan seemed uncomfortable. He would say everything was under control and that I didn't need to worry about it. One evening I asked if we could review some of the company paperwork together, just to stay organized. Ethan immediately refused. He said the documents were complicated and that it was better if he handled them alone. His reaction surprised me because he had never minded sharing those things before. After that, I began noticing other details that didn't feel right. Ethan started taking phone calls in another room and lowering his voice when he spoke. Sometimes he stepped outside to talk and returned looking tense. I kept telling myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Businesses grow, responsibilities increase, and stress can change people for a while. That was the thought I held on to whenever doubts appeared. Still, the feeling in my stomach didn't go away. It wasn't anger or fear at first. It was simply the quiet sense that something important was being hidden from me, and I didn't yet know what it was. One evening Ethan said he had to meet a client after dinner. He left the house quickly and told me he might be late. I stayed home finishing some work of my own, but I kept thinking about how distant things had become between us. Later that night I remembered that Ethan had asked me earlier in the week to find a receipt he needed for taxes. He said it might be in the small office room we used for paperwork. Since I had some time, I decided to look for it. The room was quiet and dimly lit. Most of Ethan's files were stacked on the desk and inside a cabinet. I started checking the folders one by one, hoping to find the receipt quickly. While searching, I noticed a folder that looked newer than the others. Inside were several bank statements and printed transaction records. At first I thought they were normal business documents, but something caught my attention. Large amounts of money had been transferred out of our joint account. The transfers were not small payments for supplies or workers. They were tens of thousands of dollars moved into another account I didn't recognize. I checked another page, then another. The same thing kept appearing. More transfers, more unfamiliar account numbers, and dates that stretched back several months. My hand started to shake as I sat down in the chair. None of this had ever been mentioned to me. If these were normal business transactions, Ethan would have told me about them. When he finally came home later that night, I was still sitting in the office with the papers spread across the desk. I asked him calmly what the transfers meant. Ethan barely looked at the documents before answering. He said it was simply part of running a company and that moving money between accounts was normal. I tried to ask more questions, but he became impatient. He told me I was worrying about things I didn't understand and that I should trust him to manage the business. His answer felt cold and dismissive. I wanted to believe him, but the documents in front of me made it impossible to ignore the growing feeling that something serious was being hidden. After the night I found those bank records, the house felt different. Ethan acted as if nothing had happened. He went to work, came home late, and avoided any serious conversation. I stopped asking questions because every time I tried, he became defensive. Instead of answers, I only received short replies and cold silence. For a while I tried to focus on my own routine and keep life normal. But the feeling that something was wrong never really left me. I began paying closer attention to small details, his schedule, the way he spoke on the phone, and how often he left the house for meetings. One afternoon Ethan told me he had to stop by the office to check on some equipment that had arrived. He said it would only take an hour. Something about the way he said it felt rushed, but I didn't say anything. Later that evening I realized I had accidentally left an important folder in the car we both used. I needed it for work the next morning, so I decided to drive to the office and get it before it got too late. When I arrived, the front lights inside the office were still on. I walked toward the door quietly, thinking Ethan might still be finishing work. Before I opened it, I heard voices coming from inside. Ethan was speaking, but his tone was different, soft and relaxed in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. A woman was with him. I didn't recognize her voice at first, so I stayed still near the door. As their conversation continued, the words became clearer. They were talking about moving forward together, about plans for the future. Then I heard the woman laugh and Ethan say her name, Vanessa. He told her that once everything was settled financially, things would be easier for them. He spoke about leaving the past behind and starting a new life. In that moment, everything made sense in the worst possible way. The hidden money, the distance, the secrecy. The company I believed we were building together had quietly become the foundation for the life Ethan was planning with someone else. I didn't walk into the office that night. After hearing enough to understand what was happening, I quietly stepped away from the door and left the building. My mind felt heavy and strangely calm at the same time. The truth was painful, but at least the confusion was gone. When I got home, I sat in the living room waiting for Ethan to return. The house was silent except for the clock on the wall. Hours passed before I finally heard the front door open. Ethan walked in looking tired, but when he saw me sitting there awake, he seemed slightly surprised. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked him a simple question. "Who is Vanessa?" The color in his face changed immediately. At first he tried to pretend he didn't understand what I meant. But I didn't look away, and I didn't repeat the question. After a few seconds of silence, his expression hardened. The nervous look disappeared and was replaced by something cold. He sat down across from me and said there was no point hiding it anymore. He admitted that he had been seeing Vanessa for a while. He said their relationship had become serious and that he had already made up his mind about what he wanted. Hearing him say those words out loud felt unreal. I asked him about the business, about the money that had been moved from our account. His answer was even more shocking. Ethan told me the company was legally registered in his name. According to him, the money I gave at the beginning was simply an investment that helped start the business. He said every business has risks, and sometimes people lose money. There was no apology in his voice. No regret. He spoke about our marriage like it was just a mistake that had run its course. In that moment something inside me changed. The man sitting across from me wasn't the partner I thought I married. I finally understood that while I believed we were building a life together, Ethan had always been thinking about himself first. After that night, I stopped arguing with Ethan. There was nothing left to debate. He had already made his decision, and it was clear that emotions would not change anything. Instead of confronting him again, I chose to stay quiet and focus on understanding the situation fully. For the next few days, I watched carefully and paid attention to everything around me. Ethan continued acting as if the marriage was already over. He spent less time at home and more time outside. The distance between us became even more obvious, but I no longer tried to close that gap. While Ethan was busy with his own plans, I began organizing every document related to the business. I gathered old folders, receipts, emails, and printed agreements that had been saved over the years. Many of them were things I had kept simply to stay organized, never expecting they might become important later. I spent long evenings at the dining table going through each paper slowly. Some documents showed how the first payments were made when the company started. Others contained notes about early expenses, equipment purchases, and contracts. As I reviewed everything, I started to notice details that Ethan had probably forgotten about. There were written messages discussing how the money would be used to build the company for our future. Some emails even mentioned that the investment was something we were doing together as husband and wife. One particular document caught my attention. It was an early agreement about the business equipment we purchased at the start. The receipt clearly showed that the payment came directly from our joint account. Attached to it was a note Ethan had written about using our shared savings to launch the company. Seeing that evidence gave me a different kind of clarity. The money was not just a random payment or a simple gift. It was clearly part of a plan we had made together. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a small sense of control returning. Ethan believed he had already secured his future, but the documents in front of me suggested that the story might not be as simple as he thought. After organizing all the documents, I knew I needed professional advice. The situation had become too serious to handle alone. I searched for a lawyer who specialized in financial disputes and marital assets, and after a few calls, I scheduled a meeting. Walking into the lawyer's office felt strange. I had never imagined I would need legal help because of my own marriage. I carried a large folder filled with papers, receipts, and printed messages that I had collected over the past weeks. The lawyer, Daniel Harper, listened carefully as I explained everything from the beginning. I described how the business started, how the money was used, and how Ethan had recently claimed the company belonged only to him. I also showed him the documents that proved the investment came from our shared account. Daniel spent a long time reviewing the papers. He didn't rush through them. Instead, he studied each detail and asked clear questions about the timeline and the conversations that had happened when the company was first created. After looking through everything, he finally leaned back in his chair and explained something important. In many cases, when money from a marriage is used to build a business, that contribution can still be considered part of the shared assets between spouses. The fact that Ethan registered the company in his name did not automatically erase my financial involvement. Hearing that gave me hope I hadn't felt in weeks. Daniel said the documents I collected were strong evidence showing that the investment was made with the expectation that the business was part of our shared future. Over the next few meetings, we organized everything carefully. Each receipt, transfer record, and written note was placed in order to show exactly how the company had been built from the beginning. While Ethan continued moving forward with his own plans, he had no idea that a quiet case was being prepared step by step. For the first time since the truth came out, I was no longer reacting to what he had done. I was preparing for what would happen next. A few weeks later, Daniel told me it was time to move forward. All the documents had been organized, and the evidence clearly showed where the money came from and how it was used to build the company. The next step was to officially begin the legal process. When Ethan received the legal notice, his reaction was immediate. That evening he came home earlier than usual, holding the envelope in his hand. His face showed a mix of confusion and anger. He asked me what it meant and why lawyers were suddenly involved. I stayed calm and told him the situation was simple. The business had been built using money from our marriage, and I had every right to protect my financial contribution. For the first time since everything began, Ethan seemed uncertain. A few days later the legal meeting started. Ethan arrived with his own lawyer, clearly believing he could quickly prove the company belonged only to him. But as the documents were presented one by one, the atmosphere in the room slowly changed. The records showed the exact transfers that came from our shared account at the beginning of the company. There were receipts connected to equipment purchases and written notes describing how the money would help build our future together. Each paper made the story clearer. Ethan's confidence slowly disappeared as the evidence continued to appear. His lawyer asked several questions, but the documents spoke for themselves. The company may have been registered in his name, but it was obvious that the foundation of the business came from the investment we made during our marriage. For the first time, Ethan understood that the situation was not as simple as he had believed. Walking away with everything was no longer possible. The company he had worked so hard to grow was now directly tied to the financial choices he made years earlier. What he once saw as a clean escape from our marriage had turned into a complicated problem he could no longer ignore. After the legal process ended, I finally felt a sense of closure I hadn't felt in years. The company was divided fairly, and my financial contribution was recognized. Ethan could no longer claim the business as entirely his own. He had underestimated the power of careful planning and the truth hidden in plain sight. It wasn't just about the money. Standing there in that meeting, seeing everything laid out, I realized that I had taken back more than just finances. I had taken back my sense of self-worth, my confidence, and my belief that I could protect what I had worked for. Betrayal had hurt deeply, but it also taught me to be vigilant and strong. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter. The weight of months of fear, confusion, and heartbreak began to lift. I could finally breathe without wondering what Ethan was doing behind my back. The life I thought was lost was now mine to rebuild on my terms. I spent the next few weeks reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the sacrifices I made, the trust one gave, and the way I had been treated. Instead of letting anger consume me, I focused on lessons learned. I learned that loyalty is valuable, but it must be protected. Trust is powerful, but blind trust can be dangerous. Most importantly, I learned that my voice and my actions matter even when someone else tries to take advantage of me. From that point forward, I made a promise to myself: I would never allow anyone to treat my loyalty or my efforts as a transaction again. I would approach relationships and business with clarity, awareness, and boundaries that could not be crossed. Life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. I returned to my own work, pursued new projects, and surrounded myself with people who valued honesty and respect. The pain of the past remained, but it no longer controlled me. In the end, I realized that betrayal can break someone temporarily, but it cannot define their future. By staying calm, being careful, and standing up for myself, I reclaimed control over my life. I walked away stronger, wiser, and ready to build a future that belongs entirely to me.